With Monster Hunter World, Rise, and Stories 2, I imagine a lot of people are facing the same problems I am. You want Monster Hunter homies to play with, but unfortunately getting people into the game is probably the hardest part. Sure, you can cross-reference the videos online, finding which of the recent games have the longest videos on them, bitching about how casualized the franchise is getting to find the easiest one to get people into it, but who has the time for that? Plus, you have to watch video essays. Luckily, there's a faster, easier, and video essays free solution. It comes in the form of a game released 9 years ago called Dragon's Dogma. Well, released in 2012 and then re-released in 2013 and re-released in 2017, now it falls under the title Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. Dragon's Dogma, as I'll be shortening it to, is a fantasy medieval RPG that ticks every box a game like that should. Tight combat, great story, beautiful art direction, terrible anime adaptation, and an excellent endgame. We'll start with the two things you should be aware of before the game even starts. I'll go more in depth on this later, but Dragon's Dogma has what I'd call a living world. In simpler terms, it means a completionist's worst nightmare. Progressing the main story can lock you out of certain side quests because NPCs will either do them themselves or die. So if this video is able to successfully sell you on the game, it can also double as a nice little guide to see which quests you need to complete by the end of each phase. And if you don't care about the game, then it just means a slightly more wordy introduction to the graphics or some shit. The second step is to install a mod. Not a graphics overhaul, not a bug fix, not even a nudity mod. The first thing you should hear on startup is the original title music. You might think this is a strange request until you've heard the music. Let's just say if you put Into Free into your sex playlist, you will actually perform better because you feel challenged by how hard this song fucks. This game pretty much immediately throws you into the fray with a nice spectacle and opening fight. I'm not going to give you the frame by frame, it's basically a borderline tutorial, but it does get a lot cooler later if you do care about the game's story. The real game begins with the character creation. The game's character creation system is shockingly in-depth and highly open for ways to just ruin your immersion completely. Any characters you want to recreate, you pretty much can with relatively high accuracy. Once you've played the tutorial over and over again because you keep accidentally making immersion-breaking characters, it's finally time for the actual game to start. Your first fight is with the best character in the game, an aircraft carrier-sized dragon with the coolest voice ever. You get creamed of course, but being as the only human who fought back, as well as the only one with green skin, depending on how much you fucked with the character creation, the dragon senses something different about you. The dragon proceeds to rip out your heart and eat it, turning you into the Arisen, a warrior set on a journey to reclaim your heart and slay the dragon. This game lulls you in with the simplest of premises, and if you're worried that despite Hideki Itsuno's hands in it, things aren't going to get crazy, don't be. That comes later. After you survive getting your heart ripped out, you must choose one of the 3 starter classes to go with. There's actually 9 classes in the game and you can swap them out at any time, but for simplicity's sake I'll be breaking them down to their base colors because a lot of them do end up overlapping. The 3 main colors are red, blue, and yellow. Red is the general sword class. If you want to have a standard medieval game experience or you just want to turn this into the berserk game, then that's the class for you. Blue classes are for magic, and they're also easily the most broken class set in the game. Every class has the potential to be broken, but magic can be done quite easily and quite early. The level cap for leveling up in this game is literally infinity, but really that just means you can level up 200 times with 200 being marked infinite. Magic allows you to break the game at level 16. If you like power fantasies and being utterly worthless against golems, then magic might be your go-to. Finally, we have the yellow class, which is probably my personal favorite. Despite being known as the Ranger, ironically the bow is probably the least standout thing in its kit. The real MVP is the daggers. My favorite thing in this game is to grapple and climb bosses, which you can do, so of course I was going to gravitate towards the weapons best built for that. Additionally, if you like dodge rolling in your melee-based games, then unfortunately it is exclusively bound to the daggers. This doesn't provide too much of a problem in game because melee-based classes can just tank it and magic classes can absolutely wipe everything out before they even land a finger on you, but it's just something I should mention. I should also mention that if you're tired of the pesky stamina system, that you can also use the dodge roll as a pseudo-infinite sprint. After selecting your class, it's time to set off with your journey, but first, more character customization. Now you have to create your sidekick, a pawn. Pawns are soulless husks, a facade of a human being, incapable of feeling any real love towards you. The process for creating a pawn is the exact same as creating a main character, so I won't bother to repeat myself. However, one thing I should mention is if you're not satisfied with your pawn design, don't worry, this guy can just reset it for you so you don't have to restart the entire game. You can also invite 2 more people from the custom created colorful cast of characters that is user created pawns. You can find some diamonds in the rough in those user created pawns, or just really racist ones. Luckily, the higher level you get, the less zany the pawn names become because people are taking the game more seriously. Although I must admit, I'll always miss encountering someone who made a fucking David Spade pawn for some reason. Okay, this is gonna probably be a weird, tangent, and I know I'm probably etching into video essayist territory for, breaking out into a random story about my childhood, but this is the perfect opportunity to segue into the story. When I was a kid, my method for summoning snow days was to just watch a David Spade movie, and this had a 90% accuracy rating throughout all the entire time I fucking did this. A blizzard got straight up willed into existence because I watched Tommy Boy on a 20% chance of snow day. Tangent over, I apologize. It's just, that is the only opportunity I think I'll ever have to coherently transition into that story. Once you complete all the quests you need, you finally finish off phase 1 with a pretty kick-ass Hydra fight. Savor that fight because you'll need it to get through the next part. Phase 2 of Dragon's Dogma is unfortunately where all the worst parts of the game are. The bad news is that means you'll experience all the worst the game has to offer in the first 2 hours. Luckily, if you can push through it, that means it's smooth sailing from here. The game's lowest point comes in the form of an escort mission. A very long escort mission, on a set track, with a slow-moving carriage. It's a long walk, so I recommend booting up a video for background noise to make it go faster. My personal recommendation is one of the many stream highlights I've edited for Brendaniel, or this specific Mandalore gaming video. However, if your phone happens to be dead at the current moment, you might as well take the time to appreciate the scenery. As I've mentioned, the game came out in the early 2010s, and the graphic style shows this very clearly. Everything's slightly drab and colorless, but this actually ends up working out greatly in the game's aesthetic's favor. It's a medieval setting, so it being drab actually fits quite well. Other than the drabness, everything actually does look pretty well made. There was no textures that I could point to that I was like, oh, that looks bad. The humans do end up looking a little bit dumpy, but the enemies look great. A lot of the enemies are stylized, so they end up actually holding up really well, even by today's standards. Another advantage of its older graphic style is that I can recommend it to you on any given system you have that will play it. Even if you don't have a PC, you'll get roughly the exact same experience regardless of what you play it on, so pick your poison. This game may be the poster child of early 2010s graphics, but it does actually break the convention of those games in a very unique way. For some reason with most games, night is nothing more than a blue filter with maybe a couple new enemy spawns, but in Dragon's Dogma, night is full-on darkness. Even if you're well equipped, getting lost and ambushed at night is pretty much a given, and that's what makes it all the more fun and exciting. But for now, let's just hope you reached Grand Soren by daybreak. Grand Soren is essentially the game's pretty solid hub world. It's where you spend most of your time outside of quests gathering material, so prepare to get ready for the sounds of the city. Grand Soren also introduces you to the concept of infinite stamina in non-combat zones, which actually works well as a way to use shortcuts, because non-combat zones also apply to dungeons you've cleared out, so you can basically clear an entire level and then just come back as a shortcut. It's a neat concept, but it's kind of rendered irrelevant once you get your hands on the fast travel system. Fast travel works with 2 different items: port crystals and fairy stones. Port crystals are fast travel points you can put on any point in the map, and you can usually find them in important locations and dungeons. But you can only fast travel to them with the use of fairy stones. These are a one-time use fast travel token, and if that sounds like a shitty concept, don't worry, you get an infinite number of these in Grand Soren. Even if you're not going to use the other DLC items, just use the Eternal Fairy Stone, it's better. Your arrival at Grand Soren marks the end of Phase 2, and it's now all smooth sailing from here. Phase 3 is where most of your side quests are going to be completed, so you'll have plenty of time to realize why the combat is so praised whenever the game is brought up. If you spell it out, it doesn't sound all that exciting. It's basically a 2-button system of light and heavy attacks. Standard stuff really, but things really start to expand when you hold down the bumpers. These allow you to use advanced attack options, giving way for big beefy unique attacks at the cost of stamina. This allows for ease of access, as the combos are essentially keyed to a button prompt instead of an inputted combo. Despite its simplicity, the combat remains very satisfying. This is due in great part because of its challenge. Early game, even from bandits to goblins, you feel like you are fighting for your life out there. One moment I fondly remember is fighting my way through thousands of goblins, only having to book it when a fucking dragon shows up. This combat is going to be burned into your memory due to the game's quests. Quests in this game can be separated into 3 groups. The main story ones, which are the most engaging, the board quests, which thankfully autocomplete, and finally side quests. These side quests aren't exactly standout, but there's one good reason why I look forward to even the most generic fetch quest throughout every playthrough: the forgery system. This allows you to be the hero of today that crashed the economy of tomorrow, because you swapped out every single important item you're supposed to deliver for an exact replica. For example, the Duke tasks you with returning his beloved ring. This is a very good magic using item. I could return the ring to him immediately, but instead, I'm going to forge an exact copy, give him the copy, and then break into the castle later to get the rest of the gear that requires the ring to open. If I've done my job right, your feelings watching this video should be the same as mine when I was playing the game for the first time. The game is pretty solid, with a few high points like sieging a fortress full of goblins. But from here on out, it's nothing but the good stuff. Because from here, the big boy quests start to come out of the woodwork. You are tasked with tackling one of the best fights in the game, as well as a testament to the game's shockingly high amount of world building. Compared to other open world games, the world in Dragon's Dogma is incredibly small, but it is very tightly knit. I've mentioned this before, but the world does feel genuinely alive. Despite the way everyone treats you, you are not the center of this world. The more you progress the main story, the more NPCs will just complete quests on their own, unless you've done it for them. Additionally, some side quests actually have repercussions for other side quests. Over the course of Phase 4, there's a trial going on. A wealthy merchant is accused of treason, and it's up to you to either gather evidence to pardon or condemn him. During the course of my playthrough, I got a family evicted. This was not my intent. I usually like helping them, but apparently if you talk to them in the right order, yeah, you just evict them. This wound up helping me in the future because each member of that family wound up having evidence for the trial. There's also the beloved system, which is kind of introduced through the worst romantic pick in the entire game. Literally anyone is a better pick than this character, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic. You can literally romance any character in this game. The game does encourage main NPCs as your romantic choice, but you can still do side characters, it just takes more effort. You raise affinity through the gifting system, but the highest way to raise affinity is through the mainline NPC quests. So be careful. Although it gives very good items on the quests, you don't want to disrupt the close, loving relationship of your two ass cheeks by way of Fornival's massive ogre cock. While you wait for the trial results, you might as well entertain yourself with the second best boss fight in the entire game. Bosses in this game are already a highlight. You have unique fantasy creatures with their own gimmicks. You have your standard stuff like Cyclopses, Golems, Activision Blizzard higher-ups, and of course, lots of dragons. On its own, the Griffin fight is pretty good, but doesn't really stand out amongst the group of bosses you can face in this game. The quest version stands high above the others, though. That's because this boss fight is entirely a set piece. Everything that makes this game good comes together for one wonderful, memorable moment. The fight is amazing, there's a cute callback where an NPC you previously did a quest for comes back to help you, and finally, that music. Dragon's Dogma knows exactly where to use its music. There's a peaceful ambient track as you're exploring, an intense one as soon as you meet a mini-boss, and finally, as soon as you score an advantage on that boss, there's this. It doesn't matter how low your health is, how many pawns of yours are dead, or the fact that you're currently completely out of stamina. As soon as that track kicks in, you are winning that fight. And when you topple that beast, you are rewarded with one of the best quest completion noises I've ever heard in a game. Once you wrap these two quests up, you'll be sent on to Phase 5, but I'm not actually going to have a segment for this one. There's nothing wrong with it, I just believe I've covered everything I really need to cover. So to avoid needless padding, I'll just put all the quests you need to complete by the end of Phase 5 right here, and in 3 seconds we'll just move on to Phase 6. Phase 6 is the end of the line, which means tie up any loose ends you have in your subquest menu. Once you beat the dragon, they're gone. You are finally tasked with dismantling the nihilistic cult Salvation. Remember Salvation? Well, neither does the dragon, because he murks their leader immediately and explains how nihilistic cults are a weirdly overused trope in creature collector games. After Plapatine gets slapatined, it's time for the actual real threat to be dealt with. You travel up the same mountain Savan traveled at the beginning of the game, realizing you're ending it where it began, and you open the door to a big fat spoiler warning. Some big revelations happen through the most badass exposition dump ever, and I wouldn't want to rob them from you. There's also the dragon fight. I know you're probably confused why I slapped a spoiler warning on a dragon fight in the dragon killing game, but this fight, of all else, deserves it. So if you have any desire to pick this game up, I recommend skipping to here to avoid any and all spoilers. All set? Alright, Grigori basically explains to you what the deal is with the Arisen. Essentially, consciousness in this universe is a finite resource. A resource that the Arisens must become batteries to recharge every once in a while to avoid the world becoming stagnant. If that sounds too confusing, just imagine if Darkside Phil was the only human being on Earth with a soul, and you've pretty much gotten the gist of it. After this revelation, you're given two options: stand and face the dragon and save the land, or a way out. The beloved system actually is relevant. Relevant by way of being a potential sacrifice to the dragon in order for him to fuck off in peace. But unless your beloved happens to be the fucking princess again, I think your choice is obvious. After a long and hard journey, you finally slay the dragon. And then a hole opens up in Grand Soren, and you realize shit is just getting started. You've now entered Phase 7, the end game. Phase 7 opens up a whole slew of leveling options for your character. For instance, there's the fantastic vertical dungeon known as the Everfall. You can also raid the dungeon equivalent to an early 2010s message board through Bitter Black Island. You can also throw people into the hole. You don't get anything out of it, you just throw people into a hole. I could easily triple this video's length talking about the endgame, but I would risk repeating myself quite severely. So imagine what I previously said in this video and then add the words plus cool and scary. I could say more about it, but I won't. Because I just looked out my window and my neighbor unleashed their 5 screaming children to the yard in the middle of winter, and that tends to pollute my audio. So I will use what little time I have left to highlight some problems with the game. I didn't quite notice this at first, but the more I played this game back to back to record all the footage, the more I realized that the stamina systems need to be heavily retuned. I don't mind stamina systems normally in games. If you're playing it right, they'll never get in your way, but in Dragon's Dogma, it is always getting in your way. Namely, on the PC version, moving forward is actually glitched, so you go slower than you would normally if you use a different camera direction. So when your character has so little stamina that the sex scene plays out in real time, you're gonna notice this very quickly. The other big problem is some of the classes aren't actually built for certain bosses. The warrior was the only time I wasn't enjoying the griffin fight, and honestly, just fighting a golem with a magician is like a vaudeville act. Luckily, once you hit Phase 3, some of these issues start to fade away, and also you just have mods to fix some of them. I was going to talk about the anime, but then also I realized, other than them reprising a voice actor only to put a filter over him so you can't tell, you kind of have to play the game to understand why they fucked up, and it's such a boring show. It's not even like recommendable bad. It just is really, really generic and boring. But we're here to talk about the game, not the show. And the game is very, very damn good. The critiques may sound pretty annoying, but to be honest, as soon as you get into the game, once you reach past Phase 3, that's not going to be as much of a problem for you. And replaying the game, for everything I didn't like, there were 5 things that I noticed I really did. All in all, Dragon's Dogma is a complete experience that leaves you wanting more. And luckily, there is. Dragon's Dogma is an incredible introduction to the Monster Hunter series. With the combat being very simplified and the menu only being kind of a pain in the ass to use, it's less overwhelming than just going straight into Monster Hunter. This may seem like a weird comparison, but that's actually exactly what happened to me. I got Monster Hunter World, didn't really jive with it, got Dragon's Dogma, really did jive with it, and then by the time I replayed Monster Hunter World, I realized that I actually enjoyed the combat a lot more now that Dragon's Dogma kind of taught me the basics. But look, I've played a lot of Monster Hunter since then, and I know, as fun as that game is, it can't ever replace a sequel. And I know, it's been a long wait, 9 years, but maybe this is the year. Maybe there's a way to make the impossible possible. Maybe we could bring something out of nothing. Maybe I should watch Tommy Boy again. Before this video ends, I want to give a massive thank you to the artist and all-around lovely lad Boo Radley for the wonderful job he did with my new channel icon. He is a very talented artist and has a damn good webcomic called Sabbath Buster to boot, so a link to all of his stuff will be in the description box below, and I implore you to please support him because he deserves it. Thank you so much for watching. More videos on the way, and not 20-minute ones, because honestly this one was kind of hell. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit burnt out after working on all this, because so many moving factors were just so burnout inducing. Anyway, more videos to come. And hopefully not involving games that require you to replay the whole thing when you realize you're missing like 5 seconds of footage. Good night, everybody.